of you. Great lineup. Great to have you both on stage. I believe for the first time appearing together here.
Yes.
So we have Gottfried Leibrandt, CEO of Swift, and Brad Garlinghouse, CEO of Ripple. I'm going to jump right into it with a big picture question. We're at a fintech conference here. Start with you, Gottfried. Why is Swift the future of cross-border payments?
Why is Swift the future of cross-border payments? Because, two answers. I think one is because we have 10,000 banks on the network, and that, I think, is a resilient system, correspondent banking. And the other reason is we're innovating like crazy. So the big, and I'm quite proud of that, the big innovation that we introduced 3 years ago, called GPI, Global Payments Innovation, which really takes correspondent banking into the 21st century. Essentially, we introduced a unique identifier for each payment, so you can now track your payments all the way through. We provided a set of rules for speed, and we provided transparency on the pricing. That has greatly enhanced the experience for customers. That's what it's all about. I was in China last week, not the week before last week was in Switzerland, where the Chinese banks tell me every payment we now send to the US is there within minutes. So yeah, it's nice that you have tracking, but actually now cross-border payments really has improved. The same I hear from corporates. You can now track it, it's transparent, etc. And I think the other great news is that because we already have the network, we can roll it out, make it backward compatible, etc. So we now have more than half the payments globally are on that new platform. Most of those arrive within half an hour, end-to-end, customer to customer. We've signed up about over 400 banks. All of the top 60 are on there, and we are basically looking towards general adoption in another year and a half. And then the whole of correspondent banking will be on that new platform. People will be able to track it. It will be fast, and it will be transparent. And with that, you get all the benefits of the existing model, which is bank-centric, deep liquidity, with all the controls that the banks have built around it, KYC, sanction screening, and all of the compliance controls that go with it. So I'm extremely excited about it, and I think, I do, of course, have to acknowledge the competition, which is always good. I don't think we could have done this without competition making it clear to the banks that they need to shape up their acts, so that we did jointly with them. We could also not have done it without the new technology. API for us is the big technology that made this possible, which is under the hood. And with that, I am really looking at cross-border payments and our banking community for another 100 years of resilient and good experience for customers.
Brad, what do you have to say to that?
Well, I think we are moving into a new world order. I think the Internet of Value, Ripple talks a lot about what payments look like, not just today, but in 10, 20 years. And when we think about that, we talk about this Internet of Value. How do we let value move the way information moves today? I think about the dynamic between Ripple and Swift, not dissimilar to the dynamic between when Amazon in 1997, 1998, and you got Walmart. Certainly it's a David and Goliath kind of classic story. I think that the challenge is you're dealing with, when Ripple thinks about the future of the Internet of Value, really democratizing payments, reducing costs dramatically, increasing speed dramatically, we're really thinking about it the same way we introduced new technologies like TCP/IP and HTTP that became the Internet of Information. When we talk about what the Swift network is today, it's kind of a closed network. It has a lot of members on it for sure, but AOL had a lot of members. And when we moved into the age of the Internet and a decentralized, democratic network, I think that what you're seeing introduced with blockchain technologies, and by the way, it's not just Ripple. When we think about interoperability, we think about interoperability between many blockchains. And I think that the future we see is certainly one of many networks, interoperable networks, and reducing the friction of those payments to close to zero. And I think you're going to see a lot of innovation spawn from that, part from Ripple and part from an entire ecosystem. So I'll also agree very much with what Gottfried said at the end. Competition has clearly been a good thing for Swift. I think that I do think what has happened at GPI is a big step forward. For 40 plus years, we had a construct around how cross-border correspondent banking worked. It worked, but it had a lot of limitations. We're seeing that move forward, but I think it's a step forward when you're switching from kind of, if I may, horse and buggy to hey, can we make the horse and buggy go faster? Sure, but if we can actually just move to a Ferrari, let's do that.
So you've said before that you think there's a world where Ripple could take over Swift.
Well, I've also said I thought there was ways we could work with Swift.
Let's talk about that.
Well, I'll start that comment just by saying, look, Swift is owned. I mean, I think Gottfried, by the way, has a very challenging job. Swift is owned by the banks. It isn't a traditionally kind of construct. You have a very strong chairman in how Citi kind of is an important stakeholder in that. But at the end of the day, Ripple's trying to help financial institutions and banks be successful in the future. How do we enable Santander to compete more effectively with PayPal, with Amazon, Facebook? And it's not going to be in settlement times measured in days. It's not going to be measured, settlement costs measured in $15+. So I want to see our mission in life really has been, how do we help these financial institutions be successful? Those are the same financial institutions that own Swift. And so in many ways we've thought, hey, we could work together. That hasn't played out, and I think increasingly, we are seeing more and more banks adopt Ripple's technology, and we're seeing that play out. But I have a ton of respect for what Swift has built, just to be clear.
Gottfried, how do you feel about a partnership with Ripple?
Well, first, we can negotiate it here.
Let's do that.
Maybe a couple. One is there's two types of competition. I think the one is between the bank-centric model, and then there's lots of people who are trying to build cross-border payments outside of the bank system, and that's an interesting one to watch. And there you could see a shift in paradigm. I do think that there will, going forward, be a crucial role for banks. There's a reason we have banks. There's a reason they're regulated and all of that. So I don't see the role of banks going away if they innovate fast enough, which they, I think, appear to be doing. So it's the banks to lose. So from that perspective, we are on the same boat of having a bank-centric model. In terms of one of the exciting things about the new GPI platform is the fact that it is extremely interoperable and open, and we've always had links to other networks. We're going to enhance that with API access. We are announcing, I think later today, a proof of concept with R3, an R3 blockchain on Trade, where you can initiate a payment on the Trade platform and then it goes into GPI. So we're exploring interconnectivity with a lot of things, and banks have always been about that interconnectivity. Right now, you can. I mean, to some extent, you can already do that. Santander is on Swift as well, so they can act as the peering point between the two networks. So the last thing we want to be is a closed system. I think the world belongs to open systems going forward, and that's another interesting example is. In a lot of countries, we now see real-time systems emerging, domestic real-time systems, several of them on the SWIFT network. In Australia, they went live last year with the Australia New Payment Platform, real-time, domestic, that runs on our rails in Australia. And we are now working with 4 countries in Southeast Asia to interconnect the real-time systems that they have there, using GPI as the glue between them. So essentially, you go from country to country, leveraging both the domestic real-time rails and the cross-border GPI. The other thing that excites me about it is I firmly expect that within a few years, GPI will be de facto real-time cross-border. And the way that works is because now for the first time you can track your payments, we already see that banks are starting to see where the bottlenecks are. So if it doesn't arrive within minutes, they can see what's holding it up. You can also see which banks are still on batch processing and which banks have already, most of the banks have moved to real-time process. So this transparency puts more pressure on the banks to improve their speed. And by the way, it's always good to keep in mind that SWIFT has never been the bottleneck. We run a telco, a network that transmits the messages in seconds. It's also good to keep in mind that cross-border payments, the $10 that you mentioned, are part of that thing. A SWIFT message costs 3 cents at the end of the day. So we've always provided a speedy and cheap connectivity. I think what it is about now is to enable the banks to leverage that and really make it work in seconds as well. And I am completely convinced that in a few years you will have the experience over SWIFT and the banking system to be able to do it end-to-end in a matter of seconds. We will see that evolution thanks to the transparency that the platform provides.
Gottfried, why not use Ripple's technology to do that?
Because, well, we'll have to see. I think what we are seeing, we had a long discussion about blockchain versus API. what we could see is the API technology, which is at the heart of what we do with GPI, is here today, and banks are able to integrate it. Blockchain, we think, is further out. We've run a large proof of concept with blockchain to several proof of concepts, I should say. One of them to put it inside the reconciliation between banks, Nostro Vostro, the account reconciliation between banks. We had 40 banks participate in that. It was the largest Hyperledger implementation outside IBM, really big. 500 bilateral relationships on the blockchain, 500 individual blockchains being run. When we evaluated it with banks, they said, yeah, it works as a proof of concept, but it's not clear to us that it's that much better than what we have today, given the migration cost. And a lot of it is about the banks themselves who have to migrate and be interoperating with that new platform. We find that for them it's much easier to integrate with APIs and what we're now offering them with GPI than it is with blockchain. So that has been our experience so far, and our 10,000 banks worldwide play a big role in that one. They have to be ready for that technology.
Brad, do you want to respond as to why that might not be the case?
Well, I think the Swift model. We can talk about open APIs. We can talk about open networks, but it isn't. I mean, Swift is it's a Swift-controlled API, and even I'm complimentary of what GPI has represented in terms of accelerating what has been a relatively